I never crashed the company. I just turned on the lights. Under that glare, their projected growth was really a $10.2 million lie waiting to detonate. My boss ignored the red warnings and pinned the technical liability on me. Nobody wanted the truth to ruin their presentation slides, so I sent the evidence out anonymously. By the next morning, the executive floor was silent as a morgue because the email had reached the right people. My name is Emery Morgan. I am 41 years old, and I have spent exactly 23 years building the invisible walls that keep companies from collapsing under the weight of their own incompetence. My official title at Vesper Ridge Solutions is Principal Security and Systems Architect. It sounds impressive on LinkedIn, but in reality it means I am the janitor. I clean up the mess left behind when the sales department promises a client a spaceship and the engineering department tries to build it out of cardboard and duct tape. I do not write code to change the world. I write code to prevent lawsuits. Vesper Ridge Solutions is headquartered here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We occupy 3 floors of a glass tower that overlooks the Bank of America Stadium. The interior is designed to look like a playground for adults. We have beanbag chairs nobody sits in, and a kombucha tap in the break room that has been broken for 6 months. It is all performative. Underneath the matte black espresso machines and the motivational posters about synergy, this company is just a data processing plant. We are a factory. We take raw data from massive financial institutions and we refine it. My masterpiece is a system called Vault Bridge. Vault Bridge is the spinal cord of this entire operation. It is a synchronization platform that sits between our clients' archaic legacy databases and our modern cloud infrastructure. It handles everything: social security numbers, credit histories, transaction logs, address changes. If Vesper Ridge is a body, Vault Bridge is the central nervous system. I wrote the core architecture 7 years ago. I know every vulnerability. I know where the skeletons are buried because I dug the graves myself to keep the system running during the lean years. Most people here do not know who I am. That is by design. I cultivate invisibility. I wear charcoal gray sweaters and black slacks. I sit in a cubicle in the far corner of the engineering floor, away from the loud sales gongs and the ping-pong table. Being a middle-aged woman in a tech company full of 20-something prodigies in hoodies is a superpower if you know how to use it. You become furniture. You become part of the background noise. And people say the most interesting things in front of furniture. I hear the account executives lying about feature readiness while they brew their coffee. I hear the junior developers complaining that they bypassed the security token validation because it was too hard to debug. I see things too. I watch the Git commits the digital log of every change made to our code. I watch the timestamps. I know who is working and who is outsourcing their job to an automated script so they can play video games. For a long time, the system worked. We had a balance. Then Marlo Pierce arrived. Marlo is our new director of product operations. He was brought in 6 months ago by the chief operating officer to shake things up. Marlo is 34 years old. He wears suits that cost more than my first car, and he speaks in a language entirely made of buzzwords. He talks about velocity. He talks about disrupting the paradigm. He talks about breaking things to move fast. The problem is that when you break things in my world, you do not just get a bug report, you get a federal investigation. Marlo does not like me. He calls me a blocker. He says I am the Department of No. In our weekly sprint planning meetings, he sits at the head of the table, tapping his expensive pen on the glass surface, looking at me like I am a relic from the dial-up internet era. 2 weeks ago, the friction turned into fire. We were in the main conference room, the one with the panoramic view of the city. The air conditioning was humming too loud, a low drone that always gave me a headache. Marlo was standing in front of the whiteboard, drawing a timeline that was mathematically impossible. He wanted to launch the new version of Vault Bridge version 4.0 in 3 weeks. This update included a feature called Smart Replay, which allowed customer service agents to replay a customer's session to troubleshoot issues. I raised my hand. Marlo sighed. It was a small, theatrical sigh, designed to let everyone in the room know that Emery was about to be difficult again. "What is it, Emery?" he asked. "The data retention policy," I said. My voice was flat. I do not do emotion in meetings. Smart Replay captures everything. Keystrokes, screen data. If we turn this on, we are caching sensitive user data on our edge servers. We need to run a full compliance audit before we deploy. That takes 2 weeks minimum. Marlowe smiled. It was a predator's smile. All teeth and no warmth. We do not have 2 weeks. Emery, he said, we have quarterly targets. The board wants this live before the quarter closes. If we miss the window, we miss our bonus structure. We are going to launch. We can do the audit retroactively. The room went quiet. The other engineers looked down at their laptops. They knew I was right, but they also knew Marlowe controlled their performance reviews. You cannot audit compliance retroactively, I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. That is like putting on a seatbelt after the car crash. If we store that data for more than 48 hours without encryption at rest, we are violating our contracts with our 3 biggest banking clients. Specifically, the Crown Ledger contract. Marlowe waved his hand, dismissing the law as if it were a suggestion. It is a technicality. We are prioritizing user experience. Speed is the name of the game. I want you to bypass the pre-flight compliance check in the deployment pipeline. Just comment out the code block. We will turn it back on next month after the launch hype dies down. I will not do that. I said, I am not asking you. Marlowe replied. His voice dropped an octave. It was not a request anymore. I am the director of product. You are the architect. I decide the roadmap. You build the road. If you cannot handle the pace, maybe we need an architect who is a little more agile. I looked around the room. Noah Grady, a young engineer I had trained myself, refused to meet my eyes. He was staring intensely at his water bottle. They were all terrified. They had mortgages and student loans. I understood that. I did not argue further. I learned a long time ago that you cannot win an argument with a man who thinks reality is negotiable. I nodded slowly. Understood. I said. Marlowe clapped his hands together. Great. Glad we are aligned. Let's get this shipped. I walked out of that meeting and went straight back to my invisible corner. I did not scream. I did not vent to a colleague. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and I logged into the risk management dashboard. Vesper Ridge uses an automated system to calculate financial exposure based on active code vulnerabilities. Usually, nobody looks at it. It is just a background process that generates PDFs that get buried in the archives. I pulled up the simulation for Vault Bridge version 4.0 with the Smart Replay feature enabled and the compliance checks disabled. I ran the calculation. The server took a moment to crunch the numbers. It factored in the volume of data we process. It factored in the statutory penalties for the California Consumer Privacy Act. It factored in the breach of contract clauses for our Tier 1 clients. The screen refreshed. A single line of text appeared in red at the bottom of the report. I stared at it. I blinked, thinking perhaps I had missed a decimal point. I cleaned my glasses and looked again. The number had not changed. It was not a few $1,000s. It was not even $1 million. The text read, Estimated exposure, $10.2 million. My heart hammered against my ribs. $10.2 million. That was more than the entire annual operating budget for the engineering department. That was enough to bankrupt the division. That was enough to trigger a class action lawsuit that would leave Vesper Ridge as nothing more than a smoking crater in the tech industry. And Marlowe had just ordered us to drive straight off this cliff because he wanted to hit his quarterly bonus. I sat there in the silence of the open plan office, surrounded by the soft clicking of keyboards. I looked at the report again. I looked at the timestamp. I looked at the projection. Marlowe thought he was just cutting a corner. He did not realize he was planting a bomb. I saved the report. I did not print it. I did not email it. I saved it to a local encrypted volume on my machine. The office lights hummed overhead. Outside my window, the Charlotte skyline was beginning to darken as the sun went down. I watched the cars crawling along the highway, thousands of people going home to their lives, unaware that inside this glass tower, a man in a $3,000 suit was gambling with their financial security. I was the only one who knew. I was the invisible woman in the corner, and I was holding the match that could burn it all down. Or Perhaps the flashlight that would reveal the rot. I closed my laptop. The game had changed. It was no longer about deadlines or features. It was about survival. And if Marlowe wanted to play fast, I was going to have to play hard. But I would do it my way, quietly, methodically, because the system never forgets, and neither do I. The war room on the 42nd floor was designed to intimidate. It had walls made of acoustic glass that cost more than my annual salary, a table made of reclaimed mahogany that was likely illegal to import, and a view of Charlotte that made the cars below look like ants. We called it the war room, because that is where logic went to die. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a cup of lukewarm water. The air in the room was stale, recycled through the HVAC system so many times it tasted metallic. Around the table sat the leadership team, the vice president of engineering, the head of marketing, the chief financial officer's proxy, and of course, Marlowe Pierce. Marlowe stood at the front of the room like a preacher at a revival tent. He was wearing a navy blue suit that fit him too perfectly. He clicked a remote, and the massive 80-inch screen behind him exploded in color. The slide was titled, Vault Bridge 4.0 and AI, First Paradigm. I felt a headache blooming behind my right eye. Team, Marlowe said, his voice smooth and practiced. We are not just building software anymore. We are building trust. We are building a legacy. The market is shifting beneath our feet. Customers do not want databases. They want intelligence. They want intuition. That is why Vault Bridge 4.0 is not an update. It is a revolution. He clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a graphic of a cloud with lightning bolts shooting out of it. The words, Trust by Design, appeared in a bold, sans serif font. Trust by Design. Marlowe repeated, savoring the syllables. That is our narrative. We are telling the world that Vesper Ridge is the safest, fastest, most intelligent partner in the ecosystem. We go live in 12 days. The head of marketing nodded enthusiastically, scribbling notes on her iPad. The VP of engineering looked tired. He knew the code was not ready, but he also knew his stock options were vesting next month. I cleared my throat. It was a small sound, but in the acoustically perfect room, it sounded like a gunshot. Marlowe stopped mid-gesture. He looked down the long table at me. His smile did not reach his eyes. Emery, he said, do you have something to add to the vision? I have a question about the definition of trust. I said. I kept my voice neutral. I did not look at the screen. I looked at my notebook, specifically regarding the session tokens for the new API gateway. Marlowe sighed. He looked at the other executives as if to say, Can you believe this woman? We are discussing strategy. Emery, he said, we can handle the plumbing offline. The plumbing is leaking. I said. I stood up. I walked over to the whiteboard, ignoring the tension that tightened the room like a wire. I picked up a black marker. You want to sell trust by design. Then you should know that the current architecture for the Smart Replay feature caches OAuth access tokens in plain text within the debug logs. If a support agent views a session, that token is written to a directory that is accessible to anyone with Tier 1 clearance. That includes interns. I drew a simple diagram. User, server, log file, big X mark. That is improper retention. I continued. Under the terms of the Crown Ledger contract, that is a breach of data sovereignty. If we launch in 12 days, we are launching a vulnerability that exposes every single financial institution using our platform to account takeover attacks. The room went silent. The marketing head stopped writing. Marlowe walked over to me. He stood too close, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and aggression. Emery, he said softly, you are getting lost in the weeds. Technical hurdles are normal. We fix them in the patch cycle. Right now, we need to focus on the narrative, the story we tell the street. The narrative is false. I said, you cannot patch a fundamental architecture flaw on a live banking system without downtime. We need to re-encrypt the storage layer. I need 2 weeks. Pause the rollout. Give me 14 days to sanitize the logs and implement a rotating key system. Marlowe laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. 2 weeks, he asked the room. She wants 2 weeks. Emery, the quarter ends in 19 days. If we push the launch back 2 weeks, we miss the revenue recognition window. We miss the guidance we gave to Wall Street. 2 weeks kills the quarter. 2 weeks kills our stock price. Launching a defective product kills the company. I countered. It is not defective. Marlowe snapped, his veneer of calm finally cracking. It is an MVP, minimum viable product. We iterate. We improve. Speed is the only currency that matters in this economy. We are not a library. Emery, we are a technology company. He turned his back on me and looked at the VP of engineering. Can we suppress the logs? Marlowe asked. The VP shifted in his chair. Well, technically, yes, we can turn off the verbose logging, but that makes debugging impossible if something goes wrong. Do it, Marlowe ordered. Turn off the logs. Problem solved. No logs, no plain text tokens, no breach. I stared at him. That is not a solution. That is blinding the sensors. If we turn off the logs, we will not know if we are being hacked until the money is already gone. That is negligence. Marlowe turned back to the screen, clicking to the next slide. It showed a graph with an arrow pointing straight up. It is a management decision, he said, his back to me. And I have made it. We launch on schedule. Noah, you are leading the deployment team. Correct? I looked across the table at Noah Grady. Noah was 26 years old. I had hired him straight out of Georgia Tech. I taught him how to write clean SQL queries. I taught him how to say no to bad ideas. He was the brightest engineer I had seen in a decade, but lately, Noah had been spending a lot of time in Marlowe's office. He had started wearing blazers over his t-shirts. He had started using words like synergy. Noah looked at me, then looked at Marlowe. He swallowed hard. Yes, Noah said. His voice was weak. I am leading the team. Can you get it done by the deadline? Marlowe asked. Can you disable the logs and get the build ready for the Crown Ledger demo? I watched Noah. I willed him to have a spine. I willed him to remember the lecture I gave him about ethical engineering during his first week. Yes, Noah said. We can do it. We will have to work nights. But we can do it. Excellent, Marlowe said. He beamed. That is the attitude I like. That is the Vesper Ridge spirit. Emery, sit down. We have a launch to plan. I did not sit down. I capped the marker and placed it gently on the tray. I want it noted in the minutes that I formally objected to this timeline. I said. Marlowe waved a hand dismissively. Noted. Whatever. Let's move on to the go-to-market strategy. I left the meeting 10 minutes later. I could not listen to them discuss the font size for the press release, while a $10.2 million liability sat ticking in the code base. I walked back to my desk. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, sharp anger. They were treating the truth like an inconvenience. They were treating safety like a bottleneck. I sat down and unlocked my workstation. I needed to verify the paper trail. I had generated a formal risk assessment report yesterday. The one with the $10.2 million figure in red ink. I had saved it to the shared compliance audit folder on the network drive, the standard location for all pre-launch documentation. I navigated to the folder. It was empty. My breath hitched in my throat. I refreshed the view. Still empty. I checked the backup directory. Nothing. For a second, I thought I was going crazy. Had I forgotten to save it? No. I remembered the file name clearly. Risk Assessment VB4 Critical. PDF. I opened the System Activity Monitor. As the system architect, I had administrative privileges that even Marlowe did not know about. I could see file operations at the kernel level. I ran a search for the file hash, the unique digital fingerprint of the document. Even if you change the name, the fingerprint remains the same until the content is altered. The search bar spun for a few seconds. Then it found a match. The file had not been deleted. It had been moved. 45 minutes before the meeting started, a user account had accessed the audit folder. The user had moved my report out of the shared drive and into a private, hidden folder labeled Obsolete Drafts. Then, the user had renamed the file. It was no longer called Risk Assessment VB4 Critical PDF. It was now named Old meeting notes. Discard. PDF. I looked at the user ID responsible for the change. It was not Marlowe's account. Marlowe was too smart to leave his own fingerprints on a digital crime scene. The account belonged to the executive assistant pool, a shared login used by the secretaries who managed files for the C-suite. But the IP address origin of the command came from the executive wing, specifically, from the office directly adjacent to the COO, Marlowe's office. He had hidden the evidence. He knew exactly what the report said. He had read the $10.2 million figure. He had seen the warning. And instead of fixing the problem, he had buried the report in a digital graveyard where the auditors would never think to look. He was not just reckless. He was calculating. He was building a narrative. All right, a narrative where he was the hero who delivered the product on time, and if anything went wrong later, there would be no documentation proving he had been warned. He was setting up a perfect deniability defense. I looked across the office. I could see the glass walls of the war room. Marlowe was still in there, laughing, pointing at the screen, high-fiving the head of marketing. Noah was nodding along, looking pale but compliant. They thought they had won. They thought that by moving a file and silencing the architect, they had made the problem disappear. I opened a terminal window on my second monitor. The black screen with its blinking green cursor felt like home. It felt like justice. I did not move the file back. That would alert them. Instead, I took a screenshot of the file activity log. I captured the timestamp. I captured the IP address. I captured the hash match showing the file had been renamed. Then I copied the original, renamed file to my personal encrypted drive. "You want a narrative, Marlowe," I whispered to the empty air of my cubicle. "I will give you a narrative." He thought the presentation was the story. He was wrong. The code was the story, and the code never lied. The slide deck might say trust by design, but the log said fraud by intent. I minimized the window as Noah walked past my desk. He did not look at me. He walked straight to the coffee machine. His shoulders slumped. He looked like a man marching to the gallows, hoping that if he walked fast enough, the rope would not hurt. I felt a pang of pity for him, but it was brief. He had made his choice in that room. He chose the bonus over the truth. I turned back to my screen. The war room meeting was breaking up. Marlowe walked out, looking victorious. He caught my eye from across the floor. He gave me a small, patronizing nod, the kind you give to a confused elderly relative. He had no idea. He thought he had buried the bomb. All he had done was hand me the detonator. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my home office, illuminated only by the blue glow of my 3 monitors, dissecting the anatomy of a disaster. To the uninitiated, $10.2 million might sound like an arbitrary figure, a scary number thrown out to frighten management. It was not. It was a precise, contractual calculation, and I needed to understand every cent of it if I was going to survive the blast radius. I pulled up the digitized copy of the Crown Ledger Master Services Agreement. I had access to it because 4 years ago, I was the one who designed the security architecture that convinced them to sign with us. I knew Clause 14b by heart, but reading it again in the context of Marlowe's recklessness made my stomach turn. The breakdown was terrifyingly simple. $5 million was the immediate, non-negotiable penalty for a Severity 1 data privacy breach. This was defined as any instance where personally identifiable information, or PII, was stored in an unencrypted format on a temporary file system for longer than 30 minutes. $3.2 million was the revenue clawback. If we breached the privacy guarantee, Crown Ledger had the right to demand a refund of all licensing fees paid over the previous 12 months. The remaining $2 million was the estimated cost of the mandatory remediation and forensic audit. We would have to pay for an external firm, likely one of the Big Four, to come in, tear our servers apart, and certify that we were clean. That process usually took 6 months, during which we could not sign any new clients, $10.2 million, and that was the best-case scenario. That number did not include the reputational damage or the stock price collapsing. I tabbed over to the code repository. I needed to understand exactly how Marlowe intended to trigger this clause. I knew he wanted the smart replay feature to work, but I needed to see the mechanics of his shortcut. I found it in the configuration file for the caching layer. It was a commit made 3 hours ago by a junior developer, likely acting on Noah's orders. The standard time to live, or TTL, for a session token in our system was 15 minutes. This meant that if a user stepped away from their computer, the system would log them out and wipe the temporary data after 15 minutes. It was annoying for users, but it was safe. It was compliant. The new configuration file had changed the TTL setting. It was no longer 15 minutes. It was set to 24 hours. I stared at the number. 24 hours. They were keeping the session tokens alive for a full day. I understood why immediately. For the upcoming demo with Crown Ledger, Marlowe wanted the interface to feel magical. He wanted the executives to be able to close their laptops, go to lunch, come back, open their screens, and have the smart replay feature resume instantly without a login prompt. It created an illusion of seamless speed. But to achieve that illusion, Vesper Ridge had to store the unencrypted session keys on our edge servers for an entire day. If a hacker breached our perimeter during that 24-hour window, they would not just find encrypted gibberish, they would find active keys. They could impersonate a bank manager, a loan officer, or a compliance auditor. They could move money. They could download identities. Marlowe was effectively taking the lock off the bank vault because he did not want the customer to have to turn the key. I realized then that this was not just incompetence, it was negligence, and under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, if I knew about a material deficiency in our financial controls and did not report it, I could be held personally liable. I had to create a record, a real one that could not be renamed and hidden in a folder by an executive assistant. I logged into Jira, our project tracking system. Every ticket created in Jira was assigned a unique ID number that ran sequentially. Even if you deleted a ticket, the number was burned. You could not reuse it. A missing number in the sequence was a red flag for auditors. I clicked Create Issue. Title: Critical Vulnerability. Session TTL. Configuration violates MSA Clause 14b. Description: The current build configuration for Vault Bridge 4.0 extends unencrypted session storage to 24 hours. This is a direct violation of the Crown Ledger contract. Estimated financial exposure is $10.2 million. Immediate action required: revert TTL to 15 minutes and disable Smart Replay until encryption at rest is implemented. I set the priority to blocker. I set the severity to Sev 1. This triggers an automatic page to the entire engineering leadership team, including the VP of Engineering and the CTO. I hit Submit. The ticket generated instantly PROJ 4920. I sat back and waited. The time was 8:15 in the morning. People were just arriving at the office. Phones should have been buzzing. The VP of Engineering should have been running out of his office demanding an explanation. I watched the ticket on my screen. I did not blink. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes. At the 4-minute mark, the ticket status changed from open to in review. That was standard. Someone had seen it. At the 10-minute mark, the screen refreshed automatically. The red tag that said Blocker disappeared. It was replaced by a gray tag that said Minor. The red tag that said Sev 1 disappeared. It was replaced by a blue tag that said Enhancement. My jaw tightened. They had downgraded a $10 million legal breach to a feature request. I looked at the comments section. There was a new note added by the system. Comment: This item is out of scope for the current sprint. Move to Q3 roadmap backlog. Risk assessment overblown. Feature functionality takes precedence per management directive. Risk assessment overblown, I whispered. They were gaslighting the ticket system. I moved my mouse to the History tab of the ticket. This was the forensic layer. It showed exactly who made the changes. I expected to see Marlowe's name. Or perhaps Noah's. Doing Marlowe's dirty work. Or maybe the VP of Engineering. Trying to keep the peace. I clicked the tab. The user ID that had modified the ticket was adminfin02. I froze. I knew the naming convention for the admin accounts. Admin sys was it. Admin prod was engineering. Admin Fin belonged to the finance department, and 02. That was the specific seat license for the Deputy Chief Financial Officer, Julian Keller. Julian Keller was the man who signed the checks. He was the right hand of the CFO. He was the one who managed the company's cash flow and investor relations. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Marlowe was not acting alone. Marlowe was not just a rogue product guy trying to make a splash. The downgrade had come from finance. Julian Keller had personally logged into the engineering ticketing system, something he almost never did to silence a security warning. That meant the rot went all the way to the money. The executives knew. They knew we were going to miss our quarterly numbers unless this product launched. They knew the stock would tank if we delayed. So the finance department had done the math. They had calculated that the risk of getting caught by Crown Ledger was preferable to the certainty of missing their earnings targets. They were betting $10.2 million of the company's money that the auditors would not look closely. They were betting that I would stay quiet. I opened my screen capture software. I did not use the standard Windows tool. I used a third-party forensic tool that embedded the system clock and the machine ID into the metadata of the image. I took a snapshot of the ticket as it appeared now, with the enhancement tag. Then I expanded the History tab showing Admin Fin 02 making the change at 8:25 in the morning. I took a snapshot of that. Then I went back to the code repository and took a snapshot of the commit that changed the TTL to 24 hours. I had the crime. I had the motive. And now, I had the fingerprints of the accomplice. I compiled the images into a single encrypted folder. I named it simply Insurance. I looked at the ticket one last time. Proj 4920. It was now buried in the backlog, destined to be ignored until long after the explosion occurred. They thought they had neutralized the threat. They thought that by changing a label from critical to enhancement, they had changed reality, but they had made a fatal error. By involving the deputy CFO's account, they had escalated this from a technical dispute to corporate fraud. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. The caffeine hit my system, sharpening the edges of my focus. If they wanted to play games with the finance department involved, the stakes had just gone up. I was no longer just fighting a bad boss. I was fighting the entire C-suite. I needed to be careful. If they knew I had this screenshot, they would fire me for cause before lunch. They would accuse me of unauthorized access or insubordination. They would lock me out of the building. I had to act normal. I had to be the defeated employee. I opened my email client and drafted a message to Noah. Subject ticket 4920. Update Noah. I saw the ticket was moved to the backlog. Just wanted to confirm that we are proceeding with the current configuration for the demo. I will focus on system stability. It was a surrender email. It was bait. 2 minutes later, a reply came through. Thanks, Emery. Yes. Management wants to focus on the UI flow right now. We can circle back to the config settings next quarter. Appreciate you being a team player. Team player, I muttered. I saved his email as a PDF and added it to the insurance folder. They had just confirmed in writing that they were knowingly ignoring the issue. The bomb was armed. The timer was set. And thanks to Julian Keller and Noah Grady, the fingerprints on the detonator were not mine. They belonged to the people who signed my paycheck. I checked the time. It was 8:45. The daily stand-up meeting was in 15 minutes. I stood up, smoothed out my sweater, and prepared to walk into that room and lie to their faces. I would smile. I would nod. I would tell them everything was going great, because the best way to trap a liar is to let them think they have already fooled you. The next morning, I decided to test the integrity of the corporate immune system one last time. I knew the infection had spread to the finance department, but I needed to see if there was any healthy tissue left in the executive chain. I drafted an email. It was not emotional. It was not accusatory. It was purely data-driven. I attached the original risk assessment PDF, the one Marlowe had tried to bury, and I added a new spreadsheet calculating the compound interest on the potential fines from Crown Ledger. Subject Urgent Compliance Review. Project Vault Bridge Financial Exposure. To Marlowe Pierce, Julian Keller, VP Engineering, CC, Legal Department. The attached documentation outlines a confirmed exposure of $10.2 million regarding the improper retention of session tokens in the current build. Proceeding with the launch triggers immediate liability under Clause 14B of the Master Services Agreement. I strongly recommend an immediate freeze on deployment. I hit send at 9 o'clock sharp. I watched the email land in my sent folder. I verified the timestamps. I had copied the legal department because corporate lawyers are usually the only people more afraid of risk than they are of the CEO. Then I waited. 15 minutes later, my Outlook client flickered. The screen refreshed. I looked at my sent items. The email was gone. I checked my deleted items. It was not there. I checked the server logs on my local machine. The Exchange server had issued a remote recall command. This was not a standard recall where the recipient gets a notification. This was an administrative purge. Someone with global Exchange privileges, likely the IT director acting on executive orders, had surgically removed the message from every inbox it had touched, including my own archive. It was as if I had never written it. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the cubicle farm. They were not just ignoring the fire alarm anymore. They were cutting the wires and painting over the pull station. At 10:30, the office began to buzz with a specific kind of nervous energy. The Crown Ledger pre-audit team was arriving for a preliminary walkthrough. This was the dress rehearsal before the final audit in Denver. Usually, as the primary architect, I would be leading this session. I would be the one walking the client through the security topology, answering their questions about encryption standards and penetration testing. I stood up and grabbed my notebook. I adjusted my badge. I prepared to go to the conference room. Marlowe intercepted me at the row of filing cabinets that separated engineering from the hallway. He was not alone. He was flanked by the VP of Engineering and painfully, Noah. Marlowe stopped in front of me, blocking my path. He looked fresh, energized, and completely unbothered by the fact that he was committing corporate fraud. "Emery," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby developers to hear. "Where are you going?" "To the Crown Ledger walkthrough," I said. "I need to explain the architectural changes to their risk officer." Marlowe shook his head slowly, a look of mock pity on his face. "That will not be necessary. We have restructured the presentation team. We decided to keep the room focused on the future state of the product. I am the system architect," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I wrote the security layer. They will ask questions that only I can answer." "Actually," Marlowe said, stepping closer, "we feel that your perspective is a bit dated. You are excellent at maintenance. Emery, you are great at keeping the lights on and patching old holes, but you lack vision. You do not see the big picture of where this company is going. We need people in that room who understand growth, not just roadblocks." He turned to Noah. "Noah will be handling the technical Q&A. He understands the new velocity we are aiming for." I looked at Noah. He was wearing a new blazer, stiff and unwrinkled. He looked at the carpet. He looked at the wall. He looked anywhere but at me. "Noah," I said, "you know the token retention policy is invalid." Noah shifted his weight. "We are handling it. Emery, it is a calculated risk. The bonus pool for the team depends on this launch. We just need to get through the quarter." "It is not a calculated risk," I said. "It is a lie." "That is enough," Marlowe snapped. His mask slipped for a second, revealing the cold steel underneath. "Go back to your desk. Emery, focus on the legacy tickets. Leave the real work to the people who are actually on board." He turned on his heel and walked away, his entourage trailing behind him. Noah hesitated for a fraction of a second, then hurried to catch up. I was left standing alone in the hallway. The humiliation was physical. It felt like a slap. I could feel the eyes of the junior developers burning into my back. They had heard everything. They heard the director of product call me a relic. They heard me being stripped of my authority. I walked back to my desk. I did not cry. I did not storm out. I sat down and unlocked my workstation. If I could not be in the meeting, I would monitor the system logs to see what they were demonstrating. I typed in the command to access the staging environment log stream. Access denied. I stared at the red text. I tried again. Error 403. Forbidden. User privileges revoked. My heart rate spiked. I tried to access the security dashboard, the tool I had built with my own hands 3 years ago. Access denied. I tried to pull the code from the main repository. Read access revoked. Contact administrator. They were systematically lobotomizing me. In the span of 20 minutes, I had gone from being the architect of the system to a ghost haunting the machine. They had not fired me that would require paperwork and severance. Instead, they had placed me in a digital solitary confinement. I had a computer, a desk, and a salary. But I had absolutely no ability to do my job. I sat there for an hour, staring at the blank terminal. The isolation was absolute. Colleagues who usually stopped by to ask for advice walked past my desk with their heads down. Nobody wanted to be seen talking to the problem. I was radioactive. At noon, I went to the break room to get water. Noah was there, waiting for the coffee machine to finish its cycle. He stiffened when he saw me. "Noah," I said. "I can't talk." "Emery," he said quickly, grabbing his cup. "Marlowe is waiting for the deployment schedule." "He is using you," I said calmly. "When this blows up, and it will blow up, he will not be the one holding the bag. He will point to the Git commits. He will point to the person who pushed the code. That is you, Noah." Noah turned on me. His face flushed with a mix of guilt and defensiveness. "You are just jealous that they are finally moving fast. You want everything to be perfect. The world isn't perfect. Emery, this launch is going to put a down payment on my house. I am not going to let your paranoia ruin that." "It is not paranoia when the contract explicitly forbids it," I said. "Just let it go," he hissed. "Stop trying to be a hero. Nobody likes a martyr." He walked out. I returned to my desk. The silence around me felt heavier now. I was not just fighting management. I had lost the team. Marlowe had successfully bought their loyalty with promises of bonuses and stock options. At 2:00, a notification popped up in the corner of my screen. It was an Outlook calendar invite. Subject Performance Improvement Plan, PEP. Review. Host Human Resources. Attendees, Marlowe Pierce, HR Director Time. Tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. I stared at the screen. A PIP, in the corporate world, a performance improvement plan is not about improvement. It is a formal declaration of intent to terminate. It is a legal shield the company constructs so they can fire you without paying unemployment or facing a wrongful termination lawsuit. I opened the attachment included in the invite. It was a draft of the complaints against me. Employee displays a consistent lack of cooperation with leadership. Employee fails to align with strategic company objectives. Employee creates unnecessary bottlenecks in the production pipeline. Employee demonstrates resistance to modern agile methodologies. They were framing my adherence to the law as resistance. They were framing my refusal to commit fraud as a lack of cooperation. It was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. They were going to fire me for doing my job too well. I looked around the office one more time. The hum of the servers, the clicking of keyboards, the low murmur of meetings, it all felt alien to me now. I had spent 23 years building walls to protect this place, and now those same walls were closing in to crush me. But they had made a mistake, a critical, arrogance-fueled mistake. They assumed that because they took away my access to the live system, I was powerless. They assumed that because I was silent, I was defeated. They assumed that a PIP would scare me into signing a resignation letter. They forgot that I was the one who designed the disaster recovery protocols. I knew where the backups lived. I knew where the shadow logs were kept, the ones that even the admins forgot about, because they were automated processes running on the redundant hardware in the basement server room. I accepted the calendar invite. "Okay," I whispered. "You want to talk about performance. Let's talk about performance." I did not pack up my things. I did not look defeated. I simply adjusted my glasses and opened a local text editor. I began to type out a timeline. Not for HR, not for Marlowe. I was writing the script for what was coming next. If they wanted to paint me as the villain, I would show them what a villain actually looked like. I would not destroy the company. I would simply hold up a mirror so high definition that the reflection would burn them alive. The PIP meeting was tomorrow. That gave me 19 hours. 19 hours to turn their trap into my weapon. It was 5:30 in the afternoon when Marlowe finally played his hand. The office was thinning out, the sun casting long, orange shadows across the carpet, turning the open-plan workspace into a maze of silhouettes. I was packing my bag, preparing for the inevitable insomnia that would greet me at home, when Marlowe's executive assistant appeared at my cubicle wall. She did not smile. She simply told me that Mr. Pierce needed to see me immediately for a compliance signature. I walked to his office. The blinds were drawn, which was unusual. Marlowe liked to be seen. He liked the theater of leadership. Closing the blinds meant he was doing business he did not want the audience to witness. He was sitting behind his desk, a single sheet of paper resting on the glass surface in front of him. He did not offer me a seat. He did not offer me water. He uncapped a fountain pen and pushed the paper toward me. "We are finalizing the release candidate for the Crown Ledger demo tomorrow morning," Marlowe said. His voice was devoid of the charm he usually plastered over his malice. "Compliance requires a final sign-off from the principal architect attesting that the system is ready for production." I looked at the document. It was titled Certificate of Architectural Integrity and Security Compliance. I read the first paragraph. It was standard boilerplate. Then I read the second paragraph, and my blood ran cold. The text read, "The undersigned acknowledges that they have personally reviewed all security protocols and certifies that the system meets all contractual obligations defined in the Master Services Agreement. The undersigned assumes primary responsibility for any technical deviations or data retention failures discovered post-launch." It was a trap. It was not just a sign-off, it was a confession letter written in advance. If I signed this, and the $10.2 million fine hit us next week, Marlowe would pull this paper out of a drawer. He would tell the board that he had relied on my expert certification. He would claim he was misled by a negligent architect. He would walk away clean, and I would be sued into oblivion. I looked up at him. "I cannot sign this." "Why not?" Marlowe asked. He was leaning back in his chair, playing with his cufflinks. "It is a standard form." "It is not standard," I said. "This clause shifts liability from the executive officer to the technical lead, and I cannot certify that the system meets contractual obligations because we both know it does not. The token retention policy is a direct violation of the Crown Ledger Agreement." Marlowe's eyes narrowed. "The system is fine. Emery, we fixed the issue. Noah pushed a patch an hour ago." "I have been locked out of the repository," I reminded him. "I cannot verify any patch." "And unless you re-encrypted the database and cleared the cache, you did not fix the issue. You just hid it." Marlowe stood up. He walked around the desk and leaned against the edge, towering over me. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "The Crown Ledger team will be here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. This document needs a signature before they walk in the door. If the launch is delayed because of missing paperwork, that is cause for immediate termination with cause. That means no severance. That means no references. That means I will make sure you never work in this industry again." "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "I am giving you a choice." Marlowe said, "Sign the paper, keep your job, and let us handle the business side, or refuse, and pack your desk right now." My hand hovered over the paper. For a second, just a split second, fear took over. I thought about my mortgage. I thought about my health insurance. I thought about how hard it is to find a job when you are 41 years old and blacklisted by a vindictive executive. But then I looked at the words, "assumes primary responsibility." If I signed this, I wasn't just losing a job. I was losing my integrity. I was becoming an accomplice to a fraud that could expose millions of people to identity theft. I straightened my spine. I looked Marlowe in the eye. "No," I said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Marlowe did not scream. He did not throw things. He simply smiled. It was a terrifying, dead smile. "Okay," he said softly. He picked up the paper and slid it back into a folder. That is fine. Emery, I do not need your signature specifically. I just need a signature. Who is going to sign it? I asked. Noah. That is none of your concern anymore, Marlowe said. Go home. Do not come in tomorrow until your HR meeting. We will handle the demo. He turned his back on me and looked at his phone. I was dismissed. I walked out of the office, my legs feeling like jelly. I made it to the elevator before my hands started shaking. He was going to coerce someone else into signing it. Maybe Noah. Maybe some junior developer who didn't understand what they were reading. He was going to feed someone else to the wolves to save his quarterly bonus. I drove home in a daze. The city lights blurred past me. When I got to my apartment, I did not turn on the lights. I went straight to my home office and booted up my personal rig. They had revoked my access to the main code repository. They had locked me out of the staging environment, but they had forgotten about the disaster recovery mirror. Years ago, after a hurricane scare, I had set up a passive listening node on our backup server in Virginia. It was designed to receive a one-way stream of all code changes so that if the main office in Charlotte was destroyed, we could rebuild the system from the last commit. It was a read-only fire hose. I authenticated into the node using a service account key I had generated 3 years ago. I held my breath, waiting for the access denied message. The screen filled with green text. Connection established. I was in. I was viewing the raw feed of the engineering work being done late at night. It was 11 o'clock. The logs showed activity. Someone was still in the office. I filtered the stream for the most recent commits to the Vault Bridge 4.0 branch. There was a commit made at 10:45. The author was Noah Grady. The commit message read, Hotfix resolve UI latency for demo. I opened the diff file to see exactly what code Noah had written. Marlowe had told me they fixed the issue. I wanted to see the proof. I scanned the lines of code. My stomach dropped. They had not changed the token retention time. It was still set to 24 hours. Instead, they had modified the dashboard interface. If warning level shows critical return null. If compliance of flag I see false render badge. Secure. I stared at the screen, horrified. They had not fixed the leak. They had disabled the smoke detector. Noah had written a script that specifically intercepted the warning signal generated by the non-compliant tokens and suppressed it. Worse, he had hard-coded the system to display a green secure badge on the dashboard even when the encryption was missing. This was not negligence. This was active deception. They were building a fake dashboard to show Crown Ledger tomorrow. When the auditors looked at the screen, they would see green lights. They would see 100% compliant. But underneath, the data was naked and vulnerable. Marlowe was going to look the Crown Ledger executives in the eye and sell them a lie, using a dashboard that was rigged to deceive them, and Noah had written the code. I felt a surge of nausea. Noah was a good kid. He was smart, but Marlowe had broken him. He had turned a promising engineer into a digital forger. I watched the logs continue to scroll. They were deploying the build to the demo environment. The smart replay feature was active. The trap was set. My phone buzzed on the desk. The vibration made me jump. I looked at the screen. It was a text message. The number was hidden, but I knew who it was. I picked up the phone. Message. I am sorry. He made me sign the paper. He said if I didn't, the whole team would lose their jobs. They are preparing a file on you. If the audit finds the leak, the narrative is that you set up the bad configuration before you were locked out. They are going to say you sabotaged the retention policy to hurt the company. Get a lawyer. I stared at the message. Noah. He had signed. He had signed the death warrant. Marlowe had forced the kid to take the fall for the $10.2 million risk, and the twist of the knife was the setup. They weren't just going to fire me. They were going to frame me. They were going to claim that I was the one who extended the token retention to 24 hours, and that they had locked me out to stop me. But it was too late. It was a perfect story. The disgruntled, aging architect who couldn't handle the new speed, sabotaging the project on her way out. Marlowe would be the hero who caught me. But tragically, after the damage was done, I put the phone down. The room was dark. lit only by the scrolling green text of the disaster recovery log. I looked at the code again, the fake, secure badge. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought that by locking me out and framing me, they had won. But they had forgotten one thing. Code is not just instructions. Code is evidence. Noah had written the lie. Yes, but I could see it. And because I could see it, I could prove it was a lie. I did not call a lawyer. I did not reply to Noah. I opened a new terminal window. If they wanted to blame me for sabotage, I would not give them the satisfaction, but I also would not let them launch this fraud. I had access to the disaster recovery node. I could not write to the main server. I could not stop the launch. But the disaster recovery node had one special function. It was designed to restore the system in the event of a catastrophic failure. It had a restore from backup protocol that could overwrite the production database with a previous version. I hesitated. If I did that, I would crash the demo. It would look like sabotage. It would prove their point. No, that was too blunt. That was what they expected. I needed something smarter. I needed to let them hang themselves. I looked at the text message again. They are going to say you sabotaged the retention policy. Okay, Marlowe, I whispered. You want to tell a story about sabotage? Let us tell a story about sabotage. I closed the terminal. I had a better idea. I didn't need to touch the code tonight. I needed to let them think they were safe. I needed them to walk into that conference room tomorrow morning, arrogant and untouchable. I needed them to turn on the projector. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. I was not going to sleep. I had to prepare the chain of custody. I had to document every single line of that fraudulent code Noah had pushed, because tomorrow, when the audit team arrived, I wasn't going to be the defendant. I was going to be the witness for the prosecution. I did not write a resignation letter. I did not prepare a defense for human resources. I did not call my mother to cry about how unfair the corporate world had become. When you are 41 years old and you have spent 2 decades watching men in suits gamble with other people's safety, you learn that tears are a waste of hydration. Anger is a waste of energy. The only thing that matters is documentation. I sat in the dark of my home office, the blue light of the monitors cutting across my hands. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The city outside was dead silent, but inside my machine, the data was screaming. My objective was surgical. I was not going to crash Vesper Ridge Solutions. That is what an amateur does. That is what a disgruntled employee does. I was going to do something far more dangerous. I was going to force them to be transparent. I turned my attention to the disaster recovery node. This was the back door that Marlowe and the IT department had forgotten to lock. They had revoked my credentials for the active building site, but they had left me the keys to the cemetery where the bodies were buried. I initiated a full extraction of the last 12 hours of server activity. The download bar crawled across the screen. I was pulling everything: the commit history, the chat logs embedded in the deployment tickets, the specific lines of code Noah had written to mask the vulnerability, and most importantly, the digital signature of the person who approved the push to production. When the download finished, I had a file that was 3 gigabytes of pure, unadulterated truth. But truth is fragile. If I just emailed this file, they would claim I forged it. They would say I altered the timestamps. They would say I was a hacker who planted false evidence to frame the company. I needed to make the evidence bulletproof. I opened a command line interface to generate a cryptographic hash of the data. I used the SHA-256 algorithm. This process takes the entire 3 gigabyte file and boils it down to a single, unique string of characters. If anyone changed even a single comma in that file, the hash would change completely. I took that hash string and I uploaded it to a public blockchain ledger. It cost me about $12 in transaction fees. By doing this, I created an immutable timestamp. I had proof, verified by a decentralized global network, that this specific set of data existed in this exact form at 3:14 in the morning on a Thursday. They could fire me. They could sue me. They could wipe their servers clean, but they could never erase that entry from the blockchain. I had just created a digital chain of custody that would hold up in a federal court. Next came the trap. I knew that at 9 o'clock, The auditors from Crown Ledger would ask to see the code escrow for large financial contracts. Clients demand that a copy of the source code be deposited in a neutral third-party storage facility, an escrow account. This ensures that if the vendor goes bankrupt, the bank can still access the code to maintain their systems. Marlowe had locked me out of the company network, but the escrow deposit system was an external service. It was hosted by a third-party legal firm. My credentials there were not linked to the corporate Active Directory. They were hard-coded keys that I kept on a physical USB drive in my safe. I plugged in the drive. I logged into the escrow system. I could see the package that Noah had prepared for the deposit. It was the fraudulent version of the code, the one with the fake, secure badge. I did not delete it. I did not corrupt it. I simply added a layer of metadata. I wrote a small script, an integrity banner, and injected it into the display header of the repository. This script was passive. It did not change how the software worked. It simply checked the checksums of the security modules. If the modules matched the original encryption standards, the banner remained invisible. But if the modules had been tampered with, which they had, the banner would render a bright yellow text box at the top of the screen. The text box would read, "Compliance warning, security metadata mismatch. Encryption standards not verified. View source for details." It was not sabotage. It was a mirror. If Marlowe was telling the truth and the system was secure, the banner would never appear. But if he was lying, the moment the auditors opened the escrow file to verify our code, the system itself would testify against him. I committed the change to the escrow system at 4 a.m. I sat back and rubbed my eyes. The trap was set. It was elegant. It was lawful. It relied entirely on the system doing exactly what a security system is supposed to do: warn the user of a discrepancy. Now I needed the narrative. Executives do not read code. Auditors do. But the decision-makers at Crown Ledger, the ones who signed the checks, read summaries. I opened a word processor. I typed a single page. I did not use emotional language. I did not use adjectives. I used the cold, hard dialect of risk management. Title: Executive Risk Alert. Project Vault Bridge. Critical Exposure. Section 1. Financial Liability. Current build configuration violates Master Services Agreement Clause 14b. Confirmed retention of unencrypted PII for 24 hours. Automatic penalty triggers. $5 million immediate fine. $3.2 million revenue clawback. $2 million estimated remediation. Total exposure. $10.2 million. Section 2. The trigger. The Smart Replay feature requires non-compliant data storage to function without latency. Management was informed of this conflict on Tuesday, via Ticket 4920. Section 3. The approval. Ticket 4920 was downgraded from critical to enhancement by user admin-fin02 Julian Keller. The fraudulent UI patch masking the vulnerability was authorized by Marlowe Pierce and executed by Noah Grady. I saved the document as a PDF. I looked at the clock. It was 5:30 in the morning. The sun was beginning to bleed gray light into the sky. I had the evidence. I had the trap. I had the summary. Most people in my position would have sent this to the CEO. They would have hoped that the big boss was a good person who just didn't know what his subordinates were doing. But I knew better. The CEO cared about the stock price. If I sent this internally, it would disappear. They would bury it, fire me, and take their chances. No, the only way to save the patient was to bring in a specialist from the outside. I opened a Tor browser. It routes internet traffic through a series of encrypted relays, making the origin impossible to trace. I navigated to a secure, anonymous email service. I did not type Marlowe's address in the recipient field. I typed the email address of the Chief Risk Officer at Crown Ledger. I had his card from the contract signing 4 years ago. Then, I added a second recipient, the external legal counsel responsible for auditing the Vesper Ridge contract. I attached the chain of custody log with the blockchain hash. I attached the PDF summary. I attached the instructions on how to view the integrity banner in the escrow account. My finger hovered over the mouse button. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked this, I was crossing a line. I was leaking confidential company information. Technically, I was violating my non-disclosure agreement, but my non-disclosure agreement had a whistleblower clause. It protected me if I was reporting a crime, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud is a federal crime. I thought about Noah, signing that paper to save his bonus. I thought about the thousands of people whose bank accounts were about to be exposed because Marlowe wanted a better slide deck. "I am not doing this to hurt you," I whispered to the empty room. "I am doing this to stop you." I clicked send. The screen displayed a small message sent successfully. I closed the browser. I wiped the history. I shut down the computer. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now, illuminating the glass tower of Vesper Ridge Solutions in the distance. It looked majestic, shining in the morning light, inside that building. Marlowe was probably drinking his first espresso, checking his tie in the mirror, rehearsing his lies for the meeting. He probably felt invincible. He probably thought I was at home crying, terrified of the HR meeting he had scheduled for 9 o'clock. He had no idea that the email was already sitting in the inbox of the one person he feared most. I went to the shower. I washed the sleepless night off my skin. I dressed in my best suit, a sharp, navy blue blazer and tailored slacks. I put on my makeup with precision. I was not going to hide. I was going to go into the office. I was going to sit at my desk, and I was going to wait for the bomb to go off. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I did not look like a victim. I looked like an architect. I grabbed my keys. It was time to go to work. The morning sun hit the glass facade of Vesper Ridge Solutions, turning the lobby into a blinding white cage. I walked through the turnstiles at 8:15 in the morning. My badge beeped a cheerful green, granting me access to the building one last time. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of a soldier who has already planted the explosives and is just waiting for the convoy to cross the bridge. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The office was already humming. The engineering team was clustered in small groups, whispering. They knew something was wrong, but they did not know what. They knew I had been locked out. They knew Noah was stressed. They knew the big demo was today. I walked to my desk. I did not slouch. I did not hide. I placed my bag on the floor, sat down, and turned on my monitors. One screen was blank, thanks to the revoked access. The other showed my email client, which was currently empty except for the Performance Improvement Plan meeting invite scheduled for 9 o'clock. I opened a spreadsheet and began to manually organize some old documentation. It was busy work. It was theater. I needed to look like an employee who was defeated, compliant, and just waiting to be fired. At 8:32, the bomb went off. It did not make a sound. It arrived as a calendar notification that rippled through the executive leadership team. I saw the reaction before I heard it. Across the floor, inside the glass-walled office of the VP of Engineering, heads suddenly snapped up. Phones were pulled out of pockets. Then, the door to Marlowe's office flew open. Marlowe Pierce stepped out. He was not wearing his jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, but not in the casual, working man style he usually curated. This was frantic. His face was the color of old parchment. He held his phone in a grip so tight, I thought the screen might crack. He marched straight to the VP's office. They huddled. I saw Marlowe gesturing wildly. I saw the VP running a hand through his hair, his mouth open in shock. A moment later, a new meeting invite landed in the general inbox, forwarded by a terrified assistant. Subject canceled. Product demo. New subject, urgent. Emergency vendor review. Compliance hold. Organizer Crown Ledger, Risk Management Office. I kept my face completely blank. I stared at my spreadsheet. Inside, I was smiling. Crown Ledger had received my email. They had seen the $10.2 million exposure, and they had done exactly what a bank does when they smell fraud. They did not ask for a clarification. They slammed on the brakes. Marlowe stormed out of the VP's office and shouted across the floor. "IT director, my office, now." The IT director, a heavy-set man named Gary, who usually spent his mornings hiding in the server room, jogged across the floor, looking terrified. Marlowe dragged him into the office and slammed the door. The glass walls were soundproof, but they were not site-proof. I watched Marlowe pacing like a caged tiger. He was shouting. He pointed at his computer. He pointed at the ceiling cameras. He was looking for the leak. I typed a number into a cell on my spreadsheet. I was perfectly calm. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were scanning the outgoing mail server. They were searching for any email sent to Crown Ledger in the last 12 hours. They were checking the file transfer logs. They would find nothing. I had used a Tor browser on a personal machine from a residential IP address. I was a ghost. 5 minutes later, the door opened again. Gary, the IT director, ran out, sweating profusely. He started typing furiously at a workstation near the admin pit. Marlowe stood in his doorway. His eyes scanned the room. They swept over the rows of developers, the designers, the project managers. Then his eyes locked on me, for a second. The hatred in his stare was so intense I felt cold. He knew. He knew in his gut that I had done this. I was the only one who understood the exposure. I was the only one with the motive. But he had no proof. And without proof, he was just a paranoid executive whose house of cards was collapsing in a strong wind. He turned his gaze away from me and focused on Noah Grady. "Noah," Marlowe barked. "Get in here." Noah jumped. He had been standing by the window, staring blankly at the city. He looked like a ghost himself. He walked toward Marlowe's office with the gait of a man walking to the electric chair. They went inside. Marlowe closed the blinds. This was the part I hated. I could not see what was happening, but I could imagine it. Marlowe was interrogating him. He was asking if Noah had talked. He was asking if Noah had sent the file. He was probably threatening to destroy Noah's career if he didn't confess. I wanted to intervene. I wanted to stand up and shout that I did it, just to spare the kid the torture. But I couldn't. If I confessed now, Marlowe would spin it. He would say I was a disgruntled employee acting out of spite. He would discredit the evidence. I had to let the process work. I had to let the auditors find the truth themselves. 15 minutes later, the door opened. Noah stumbled out. He looked sick. His face was flushed, and his eyes were wet. He walked straight past my desk without looking at me. He went to the bathroom and didn't come out. Marlowe followed him out. He adjusted his tie, trying to regain his composure. He walked across the carpet toward my desk. The entire office went silent. Everyone was watching. Marlowe stopped at the edge of my cubicle. He leaned down, placing his hands on my partition. "Emery," he said. His voice was low, dangerous. "We have a situation with the client." "Oh," I said, looking up from my monitor. "I thought the demo was at 10. "Someone sent them an unauthorized document," Marlowe said. "A document containing sensitive internal data, confidential data." "That sounds like a security breach," I said flatly. "You should check the DLP logs." Marlowe's jaw tightened. "We checked the logs, Emery. The logs are clean, which means someone went outside the network, someone who wants to sabotage this company." "Sabotage is a strong word," I replied. "Perhaps someone just wanted to ensure we were compliant." "Compliance is my job," he hissed. "Your job was to build the system." "I did build the system," I said. "I built it to be secure. If it is not secure, then I did not do my job. If someone pointed that out, they saved you a lawsuit." Marlowe laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. "You think you are clever. You think because we cannot find an email in the outbox, you are safe. But Crown Ledger is launching a vendor review. They are sending a forensic team here in an hour. And when they get here, I am going to tell them exactly who had a grudge against the new roadmap. I am going to tell them about your refusal to sign the certificate. I am going to tell them you have been hostile for weeks. You can tell them whatever you want." "Marlowe," I said. "But auditors do not care about stories. They care about hashes. They care about timestamps. They care about code." "The code is fine," Marlowe insisted, though his voice wavered slightly. "Noah fixed it." "If Noah fixed it, then you have nothing to worry about," I said. "Why are you sweating?" He wiped his forehead. He hadn't realized he was doing it. "This is not over," he whispered. "You have your PP meeting in 20 minutes. HR is going to escort you out of this building before the auditors even park their car. You will not be here to poison the well. I will be right here, I said. My meeting is on the calendar. Enjoy your last 20 minutes, Marlowe said. He pushed off my desk and walked away. He began barking orders at the marketing team, telling them to scrub the slide deck, to remove any mention of instant replay, to change the terminology. He was trying to rewrite history in real time. I watched him go. He was terrified. He was trying to frame me for the leak, because he couldn't defend the flaw. He wanted me gone so he could control the narrative when the auditors arrived. But he was missing the point. The email I sent to Crown Ledger didn't just contain the PDF. It contained the instructions for the integrity banner. The moment the Crown Ledger team accessed the escrow account, which they would do remotely before they even arrived on site, the trap would spring. I looked at the clock. 8:50. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the external escrow system. I had set up an alert on my personal account years ago to notify me whenever the deposit was accessed. Alert source code repository, accessed by user, Crown Audit Ops. They were looking, right now, somewhere in a skyscraper in New York. A risk officer was opening the code. They were seeing the yellow banner. They were reading the warning security metadata mismatch. Marlowe was running around the office trying to scrub slides. He didn't realize the building had already collapsed. I closed my spreadsheet. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. It was 8:55. Time to go to HR. I walked toward the glass conference room where the HR director was waiting. I walked past Noah's empty desk. I walked past the terrified IT director. I walked past Marlowe, who was shouting into his phone. I walked into the HR office and sat down. The HR director, a woman named Linda who always looked exhausted, had a stack of papers in front of her. "Emery," she said, "thank you for joining us. Marlowe should be here in a moment." "Marlowe is busy," I said. "He is handling a compliance emergency. I think we can start without him." Linda looked confused. "Well, the protocol requires his presence for the termination notice." "It is not a termination notice yet," I corrected her. "It is a performance improvement plan." "Right," Linda said, looking uncomfortable. "But given the severity of the friction, well, let's just wait for him." We waited. The seconds ticked by. Outside the glass wall, I could see the chaos unfolding. Marlowe was still on the phone, but he had stopped shouting. He was listening. He had stopped pacing. He was standing perfectly still. The color drained from his face completely. He dropped his hand to his side, the phone almost slipping from his fingers. He looked at the HR room. He looked at me. And for the first time in 6 months, I saw the arrogance vanish. It was replaced by the hollow, 1,000-yard stare of a man who just realized he is standing at ground zero. The Crown Ledger lawyers had called. I smiled at Linda. "I don't think he is coming," I said. "Shall we review my attendance record?" The human resources meeting ended not with a bang, but with a confused whimper. Linda, the HR director, sat there for 10 minutes shuffling her papers, waiting for Marlowe to storm in and demand my badge. But Marlowe never came. He was too busy trying to hold back a tidal wave with a bucket. Eventually, I stood up, thanked Linda for her time, and walked out. I was still employed. I was still the principal architect, and I was going back to the war zone. When I returned to the engineering floor, the atmosphere had shifted from nervous energy to open paranoia. The rumor of the Crown Ledger compliance hold had leaked. In a tech company, secrets travel faster than data packets. People were huddled in the break rooms. Developers were furiously checking their own commit histories, terrified that they might be blamed for whatever had gone wrong. I sat at my desk and unlocked my screen. I had work to do. Not the work Marlowe wanted, but the work the law required. Marlowe appeared at my cubicle wall 3 minutes later. He looked like a man who had aged 5 years in an hour. His tie was loosened, and there was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He did not yell. He leaned in close, his voice a ragged whisper. "Emery," he said, "I need you to access the staging database. We need to purge the logs from the last 48 hours. Just wipe the transaction history. I will authorize the override verbally." I turned my chair slowly to face him. I folded my hands in my lap. "No," I said. Marlowe's eyes bulged. "This is a direct order from the director of product. We have an audit team incoming. If those logs are there, they will misinterpret the data. We need to clean it up." "I do not accept verbal orders for data destruction," I said calmly. "If you want me to wipe the logs, you must submit a formal ticket in Jira. You must classify it as a data purge request. You must attach a written justification citing the specific compliance policy that requires the deletion, and you must assign it to me with your digital signature attached." Marlowe stared at me. He knew exactly what I was doing. If he created that ticket, he was creating a permanent record that he had ordered the destruction of evidence during an active investigation. It would be a felony. "I am not writing a ticket," he hissed. "Just do it. I will protect you." "Your protection is not worth the paper it is not written on," I replied. "Send the ticket, Marlowe, or the logs stay." He slammed his hand on my desk, making my monitor shake. Then he spun around and marched toward the quality assurance bay. I watched him go. He zeroed in on Kevin, the lead QA manager. Kevin was a nice guy, soft-spoken, with a mortgage and twins on the way. Marlowe cornered him. I could not hear the words, but I saw the body language. Marlowe was looming, gesturing aggressively. Kevin was shrinking, shaking his head. Marlowe pointed at a piece of paper. Kevin hesitated. Marlowe leaned closer, likely threatening his job. Kevin took the pen. He signed the paper. I felt a pit in my stomach. Marlowe had just forced Kevin to sign a risk acceptance form. He was building a paper trail that said the quality assurance team had reviewed the retention policy and deemed it safe. He was shifting the liability from his own office to a mid-level manager who didn't know how to say no. This was how they operated. They didn't just break the rules. They broke people. I needed to stop the bleeding. I needed to show the team that loyalty to Marlowe was a suicide pact. I saw Noah walking toward the elevators. He was carrying his backpack. He looked like he was fleeing the scene of a crime. I got up and intercepted him in the hallway near the fire exit. "Noah," I said. He flinched. "Leave me alone. Emery, I'm going home sick. I can't be here when they get here." "You are not sick," I said. "You are scared, and you should be." "I just did what I was told," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Marlowe said it was just a patch. He said finance approved the risk." "Finance did not approve the risk," I said. "Finance approved the fraud, and they set you up to take the fall for it." "You are lying," Noah said, though he didn't sound convinced. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had transferred the screenshots from the insurance folder to my secure cloud drive. I opened the image of the ticket history, the one showing who had downgraded the severity from critical to enhancement. "Look at the user ID," I said, holding the screen up to his face. Noah squinted at the image. "Admin Fin 02. "That is Julian Keller," I said. "The deputy CFO. He is the one who silenced the warning, not Marlowe. Marlowe is just the executioner. The order came from the money men." I swiped to the next image. It was the log of the commit Noah had pushed the night before, the one with the fake secure badge code. "And here is your contribution," I said. "You wrote the code that lies to the auditors. When Crown Ledger analyzes this, they won't look for Julian Keller. They won't look for Marlowe. They will look for the author of the commit. That is your name. Noah, you are the one who pulled the trigger." Noah stared at the screen. His face went white. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't the protege. He wasn't the future of the department. He was the disposable insulation layer between the executives and jail. "Oh my God," he whispered. "They are going to blame me." "They already are," I said. "Marlowe is telling everyone right now that you pushed a rogue update. He is creating a narrative where you are the incompetent engineer who didn't understand the requirements." Noah looked at me, panic rising in his eyes. "What do I do, Emery? Please, what do I do?" "Stop talking," I said. "Do not sign anything. Do not agree to any off-the-record chats. Go back to your desk, sit down, and wait. If they call you into a room, You demand a witness, and you tell the truth. You tell them you were acting on verbal orders from the director of product. Noah nodded frantically. Okay, I can do that. Good, I said. Now go back inside. Running away makes you look guilty. He walked back into the office. He looked terrified, but at least now he knew where the enemy was. He wasn't looking at me with anger anymore. He was looking at Marlowe's office with dread. At 10:15, the second shoe dropped. An email went out to the entire engineering distribution list. It was from the automated system that managed our external code escrow. Notification, escrow package. Retrieved by authorized beneficiary. Crown Ledger, Risk Ops. The office went deathly quiet. Retrieving the escrow code is the nuclear option. Clients only do that when they believe the vendor is in breach of contract or about to go insolvent. It meant Crown Ledger was not just auditing us. They were preparing to take the technology and run. And I knew exactly what was happening on a screen in New York. The Crown Ledger auditors were opening the package. They were expecting to see a clean file structure. Instead, my integrity banner was executing. A bright yellow box was popping up on their terminals. Compliance warning security metadata. Mismatch. It was the smoking gun. It proved that the version of the software we were running in production was not the same version we had certified. It proved we were hiding something. Marlowe burst out of his office. He looked like he was about to vomit. "Who touched the escrow?" he shouted. "Who updated the repository?" Nobody answered. The developers just stared at their screens. They knew that touching the escrow was above their pay grade. Marlowe ran to the IT director. "Check the access logs." "Who pushed the build?" "Gary." The IT director typed furiously. "It was the automated build agent, sir. The nightly sync." "Who authorized the sync?" Marlowe screamed. "You did," Gary said, his voice trembling. "It is in the recurring schedule you approved last month." I suppressed a smile. Marlowe had authorized the recurring sync. Yes, but he didn't know I had injected the banner into the build pipeline's metadata. He had automated his own confession. The office was now a hive of whispered accusations. Did you leak it? Was it the former guy? Is it a hack? The paranoia was palpable. They were eating each other alive. Then, my desk phone rang. It was a landline call. The distinctive double ring of an executive extension. I looked at the caller ID. Office of the CFO. I picked up the receiver. "This is Emery." "Emery," a voice said. It was smooth, deep, and terrifyingly calm. It was Marcus Vance, the chief financial officer, the man who sat at the right hand of the CEO. "Could you please come up to the 55th floor? I think it is time we had a conversation about architecture." "I will be right there," I said. I hung up. The 55th floor was a different world. It was quiet. The carpets were thicker. The air smelled of money and lemon polish. I was ushered into Vance's office. It was enormous, with a view that stretched all the way to the mountains. Vance was sitting on a white sofa, drinking tea. He did not look like a man in a crisis. He looked like a man watching a chess match. "Sit down, Emery," he said. I sat in the armchair opposite him. "You have been with us a long time," Vance said. 23 years. You survived the dot-com crash. You survived the recession. You are a survivor. "I am an architect," I corrected him. "I build things that last." Vance smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. "Yes, you do. And it seems you also build things that alert our partners to potential misunderstandings." He knew. He didn't say it outright, but he knew I was the source of the leak. "Crown Ledger is very upset," Vance continued, looking at his tea. "They are threatening to trigger the $10.2 million penalty. That is a significant amount of money. Emery, it affects our EBITDA. It affects our bonuses. It affects everyone." "It is better than a federal indictment for wire fraud," I said. Vance looked up. His eyes were hard. Fraud is such an ugly word. We prefer aggressive optimization. You see, Emery, we knew about the retention issue. Julian told me about the ticket downgrade. We made a calculation. We thought we could fix it in the next sprint. Before the auditors noticed, it was a business decision. My breath hitched. He was admitting it. The CFO knew. The conspiracy wasn't just Marlowe trying to impress the boss. The conspiracy was the boss. You gambled with client data, I said. We took a risk, Vance said, shrugging. That is what business is. But you forced our hand. You shone a light in a dark room before we were ready to turn on the switch. He leaned forward. So here is the situation. Crown Ledger is sending a team. They will be here in 20 minutes. They want a head on a platter. They want someone to blame for the misconfiguration. Marlowe is expendable. He is loud. He is messy. But we need a technical expert to guide the remediation. We need someone who can look Crown Ledger in the eye and tell them it was an honest mistake that is being fixed. He paused, letting the offer hang in the air. If you help us smooth this over, Vance said, if you help us frame this as a glitch rather than a crime, the position of Chief Technology Officer is opening up next month, and the investigation into your performance issues will disappear. He was trying to buy me. He was offering me the crown in exchange for my silence. He wanted me to help them bury the body so they could keep the contract. I looked at him. I looked at his expensive suit, his calm demeanor. He truly believed that everyone had a price. He thought I leaked the data just to get leverage for a promotion. I stood up. Mr. Vance, I said, I think you misunderstand the situation. I did not leak the data to get a promotion. I leaked it because I do not like working for liars. Vance's expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. Then you are choosing a very difficult path. Emery, if the company goes down, you go down with it. Your stock options become worthless. My options are already vested, I said. And my integrity is not publicly traded. You are making a mistake, he said softly. The mistake was thinking you could hide $10.2 million in a log file, I said. The auditors are coming. I suggest you have your legal team ready. I will be in the server room, ensuring the logs are preserved. I walked out of his office. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had forced them to show their hand. I knew now that the rot went to the top. There was no saving Vesper Ridge Solutions from the penalty. The only thing left to do was to make sure the truth survived the crash. I took the elevator down. The doors opened on the 42nd floor. The lobby was full of strangers in dark suits. They were carrying briefcases. They wore lanyards that said, Crown Ledger Audit Team. Marlowe was standing there, looking pale and small. He saw me step off the elevator. I walked past him. I walked past the auditors. I went to my desk and sat down. Let's begin, I whispered. The summons to Denver came less than 12 hours after the initial raid in Charlotte. When a client the size of Crown Ledger discovers a $10.2 million liability in their vendor's software, they do not conduct the execution over Zoom. They demand the accused appear in person at their headquarters to explain why the contract should not be terminated immediately. Marlowe tried to leave me behind. At 6 o'clock in the evening, after the auditors had seized the initial logs in Charlotte, Marlowe sent a department-wide email listing the travel team for the remediation summit. The list included himself, the VP of Engineering, and Noah Grady. My name was conspicuously absent. He intended to walk into that boardroom in Colorado, paint me as the disgruntled architect responsible for the legacy errors, and promise that his new team had already purged the bad code. He underestimated my knowledge of the contract I helped write. I replied to the thread, copying the Crown Ledger legal team. I simply quoted Clause 9, Section 3 of the Master Services Agreement. In the event of a Severity 1 security dispute, the vendor must provide the principal system architect for in-person verification of all remediation steps. Failure to produce the primary technical lead constitutes a default judgment against the vendor. Marlowe did not reply. He could not. Crown Ledger's lawyers responded within 4 minutes, confirming my travel details. We arrived in Denver the next morning. The Crown Ledger headquarters was a fortress of gray stone and tinted glass, sitting against the backdrop of the Rockies like a judge's gavel. The air was thin and cold. The audit took place in the obsidian room on the 30th floor. The name was appropriate. The table was black granite. The walls were dark wood. The only light came from the floor-to-ceiling windows and the massive projection screen at the head of the room. When I walked in, Marlowe was already seated. He froze. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and pure, distilled hatred. He had assumed I would be too cowed, too ashamed, or too broken to show up. He had assumed I would let him control the narrative. I pulled out the heavy leather chair directly across from him. I placed my laptop on the table. I did not say hello. I did not smile. I simply opened my notebook and uncapped my pen. Noah was sitting next to Marlowe. He looked ill. His skin was the color of paste, and he was staring at his hands, which were clenched tightly in his lap. He looked like a child waiting for the principal to call his parents. The Crown Ledger team entered a moment later. There were 4 of them, the chief risk officer, the lead auditor, and 2 attorneys who looked like they charged by the breath. The chief risk officer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who I had met years ago, sat at the head of the table. He did not offer coffee. He did not offer pleasantries. "Let us be clear about why we are here," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was quiet, which made it terrifying. "Our preliminary scan of your escrow deposit indicated a discrepancy. Today, we are going to run the build live. If the system is compliant, we resume business. If it is not, we activate the penalty clause and begin litigation." Marlowe straightened his tie. He put on his best sales face. "Mr. Sterling, I assure you, what you saw in the escrow was a metadata glitch. We have a fully patched build ready to demonstrate today. It is faster, smarter, and completely secure." "We will see," Sterling said. "Connect to the projector." Marlowe nudged Noah. Noah's hands shook as he plugged the HDMI cable into the demonstration laptop. The screen flickered to life. The Vesper Ridge login page appeared. "Go ahead," Sterling commanded. "Log in. Show us the smart replay feature." Noah typed in the credentials. He hit enter. The dashboard loaded. It was beautiful, sleek, modern, responsive. Marlowe smiled. He leaned forward, confidence returning to his posture. "As you can see," Marlowe said, gesturing to the screen, "the interface is clean. The secure badge is visible in the top right corner. We have optimized the—" He stopped. On the screen, directly over the beautiful dashboard, a bright yellow box appeared. It pulsed slowly. "Compliance warning security metadata. Mismatch. Encryption standards. Not verified. View source for details." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. Marlowe stared at the screen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the laptop, then at the screen, then at Noah. "What is that?" Sterling asked. It is a bug," Marlowe stammered. "A display error. Noah, refresh the page." Noah refreshed the page. The yellow box returned instantly. "That is not a bug," the lead auditor said. Consulting a tablet. "That is an integrity check. It means the underlying code hash does not match the security certificate. The system is telling us that the encryption is off." Sterling turned his gaze to Marlowe. "You told us this was fixed. You told us the data was encrypted at rest." Marlowe was sweating now. I could see the moisture beading on his forehead despite the aggressively air-conditioned room. He looked around the table, desperate for a scapegoat. His eyes landed on me. "This is legacy oversight," Marlowe said quickly, his voice rising in pitch. "This is exactly what I was trying to explain during our call yesterday. The old architecture, the architecture built by Ms. Morgan here, has deep-seated flaws. We have been trying to modernize it, but she has been resistant. This warning is likely a remnant of her old code conflicting with our new standards." He pointed a finger at me across the table. "Emery refused to sign the launch certificate because she knew her legacy code wasn't compatible. She is trying to sabotage the launch to protect her territory." It was a bold lie. It was almost impressive in its audacity. He was using my refusal to sign the fraud as proof that I was the problem. Sterling looked at me. Ms. Morgan, do you have a response? I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I looked at Sterling. Then I looked at the screen. The integrity banner you see on the screen is not legacy code, I said. I wrote it yesterday. It is designed to trigger only when the encryption modules are bypassed. Bypassed? Sterling asked. By whom? By the people who modified the session token retention policy. I said, the system is currently configured to store unencrypted data for 24 hours. That is why the banner is firing. That is a lie, Marlowe shouted. He slammed his hand on the table. She is lying to cover her incompetence, Noah. Tell them you fixed the retention policy. Tell them the code is clean. The room turned to Noah. This was the moment, the pivot point of the entire timeline. Noah Grady, 26 years old, sat frozen in the spotlight. Marlowe was glaring at him, his eyes wide and manic, silently commanding him to lie. Back me up, and you get your bonus. Back me up, and we survive. Noah looked at Marlowe. Then he looked at the screen with the yellow warning box. Then, slowly, he looked at me. I did not plead with him. I just watched him. I had told him the truth in the hallway. You are the disposable insulation layer. Noah took a deep breath. His shoulders sagged. It is not legacy code, Noah said. His voice was a whisper. Speak up, Sterling said. Noah looked up. He did not look at Marlowe. He looked straight at the auditor. It is not legacy code, Noah repeated, his voice stronger now. The retention policy is set to 24 hours. It is hard-coded in the configuration file. Marlowe looked like he had been shot. Noah, what are you doing? You pushed the patch. You said it was fixed. I pushed the patch you gave me, Noah said. You told me to suppress the warning. You told me to write a script that would force the green secure badge to display even if the encryption was off. I never said that, Marlowe shouted. You are confused. You are under pressure. I am not confused, Noah said. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a stapled packet of papers. He slid them across the black granite table toward the auditor. These are the printouts of the JIRA ticket history, Noah said. Ticket 4920. It shows the severity being downgraded by the finance department, and it shows the comment from Marlowe instructing me to prioritize the demo over the compliance check. Marlowe lunged for the papers, but the Crown Ledger attorney was faster. He slapped his hand down on the pile, securing the evidence. He told me if I didn't do it, the team would be fired, Noah said, his voice trembling again. He said it was a calculated risk approved by the CFO. He made me sign the deployment order. Marlowe stood up. This is ridiculous. This is a conspiracy. These two are working together to undermine the leadership team. I demand a recess. I need to call the CEO. Sit down. Mr. Pierce, Sterling said. Marlowe did not sit down. He looked at the door. He looked at the window. He looked like a rat realizing the ship wasn't just sinking, it was already underwater. The audit is not finished, Sterling said. He opened the packet Noah had slid across the table. He read the first page. Then he looked at the screen where the yellow banner was still pulsing. Ms. Morgan, Sterling said, turning to me. If the retention is set to 24 hours, does that mean our data from the Charlotte trial is currently exposed? Yes, I said. It is sitting on the edge servers in plain text. Anyone with a network sniffer could read it. Can you fix it? I can, I said, but I need root access. My access was revoked by Mr. Pierce 2 days ago. Sterling turned to the IT administrator, who had accompanied the Crown Ledger team. Grant Ms. Morgan root access to the demo environment immediately. Override the vendor's permissions. Wait, Marlowe shouted. You cannot do that. That is Vesper Ridge intellectual property. You cannot just give her keys to the kingdom. We effectively own your intellectual property as of 5 minutes ago, the attorney said, not looking up from the documents. Clause 14b, breach of contract. We are asserting control of the codebase to mitigate damages. Marlowe slumped back into his chair. He had lost. The room felt colder than before, but for me, the air had never felt fresher. I opened my laptop. The Crown Ledger. IT admin slid a piece of paper with a temporary admin password across the table. I typed it in. The terminal screen turned black, then filled with green text. Access granted. I was back in the system. I looked at the code Noah had written. It was messy, hasty, panic-induced spaghetti code, but the integrity banner I had planted was standing guard, unblinking and honest. I am initiating the purge of the unencrypted tokens, I said to the room, and I am reverting the retention policy to 15 minutes. Do it, Sterling said. I typed the command. Delete from session cache where encryption status equals null. I hit enter. Marlowe covered his face with his hands. He knew what that keystroke meant. It wasn't just deleting data. It was deleting his career. It was deleting his bonus. It was deleting his narrative. Noah was crying silently. He knew he was done too. But at least he wasn't going to jail for perjury. I watched the progress bar complete. Purge successful. 14,203. Records deleted. 14,000 records. 14,000 people whose financial lives had been hanging by a thread because Marlowe wanted a faster slide transition. I closed the terminal. The system is clean, I said. Sterling nodded. He closed the folder in front of him. Mr. Pierce, Sterling said, you will leave this building immediately. Your security credentials have been flagged at the front desk. Our legal team will be in touch with your CEO regarding the $10.2 million penalty. Marlowe stood up. He looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes, only a hollow, terrifying realization of what awaited him back in Charlotte. He walked out of the room. The heavy door clicked shut behind him. I stayed seated. My hands were still on the keyboard. Ms. Morgan, Sterling said, we have a lot of work to do. Yes, I said. We do. The video conference screen at the front of the obsidian room flickered to life. The faces of the Vesper Ridge Board of Directors appeared in high definition. They were sitting in the boardroom back in Charlotte, 3 time zones away. They looked pale. They looked like people who were watching a hurricane make landfall on their front lawn. Mr. Sterling, the Chief Risk Officer of Crown Ledger, did not waste time with introductions. He leaned into the microphone in the center of the black granite table. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Sterling said. His voice was devoid of warmth. We have just concluded a live audit of the Vault Bridge platform. The system failed the integrity check. The data retention protocols were bypassed. As of this moment, Vesper Ridge Solutions is in breach of contract. We are activating Clause 14B. That means an immediate penalty of $5 million, plus a revenue clawback of $3.2 million, plus estimated damages. The total bill is $10.2 million, and we are terminating the partnership effective immediately. On the screen, the chairman of the board closed his eyes. The CEO looked like he had swallowed a stone. Marlowe Pierce was standing near the door. He had not left the building. He had been detained by security and brought back into the room for this final judgment. He stepped forward into the frame of the camera, his hands trembling. Wait, Marlowe said. Please, this is a misunderstanding. We are dealing with a rogue technical element. We have a narrative problem, not a product problem. If you give me 24 hours, I can reshape the messaging. We can position this as a beta test. We can... Stop talking. Marlowe, the chairman said from the screen. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. We do not need a narrative. We need a liability shield. You told us this launch was safe. You told us the risk was managed. It was, Marlowe insisted, his eyes darting around the room. The risk was acceptable. The finance department agreed that the speed to market outweighed the compliance drag. We were agile. We were moving fast. I stood up. I picked up the heavy binder I had prepared. It was the physical manifestation of the chain of custody. I walked to the center of the room. I placed the binder on the table directly in front of the camera lens. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the granite echoed like a gavel strike. This is not a narrative problem, I said to the board. This is a fraud problem, and I have the receipts. I opened the binder. Exhibit A, I said, pointing to the first page. The cryptographic hash of the server logs from 3 days ago, verified on the blockchain. It proves that at 8:25 in the morning, a Severity 1 ticket regarding this exact vulnerability was created. I turned the page. Exhibit B, the system log showing that ticket being downgraded to an enhancement 10 minutes later. The user ID responsible for burying that warning was not a glitch. It was admin Fin02. That account belongs to Julian Keller, the deputy CFO. On the screen, the CEO turned to look at someone off camera. The panic in the Charlotte boardroom was now visible. They realized the rot wasn't just in product. It was in the money. I turned the page again. Exhibit C, I continued. The security sign-off document that Marlo Pierce attempted to coerce me into signing. When I refused, he ordered a junior engineer, Noah Grady, to deploy a script that falsified the dashboard display. This is the code diff. It shows the specific lines written to hide the lack of encryption. Marlo lunged toward the table. She is twisting it. She is the one who set the trap. She leaked the data. Yes, I said. I looked directly into the camera lens. I looked at the men who had signed my paychecks for 20 years. I leaked the data. The room went silent. Marlo looked triumphant for a split second. He thought I had just confessed to a crime. I leaked it anonymously, I said, my voice steady and cold. Because at Vesper Ridge, speaking the truth with your own name is career suicide. I tried to warn you through the ticket system. You deleted it. I tried to warn you in the meeting. You kicked me out. I tried to warn you via email. You scrubbed the server. You left me no choice. I did not leak this to destroy the company. I leaked it to stop you from committing a federal crime that would put us all in prison. I looked at Marlo. He was shrinking. He was deflating. The air was leaving his suit. You wanted to move fast, I said to him. You wanted to break things. Well, congratulations. Marlo, you broke it. Now you own the pieces. Sterling cleared his throat. He looked at the screen. Crown Ledger is not interested in your internal politics, Sterling said. We are interested in our data. The $10.2 million penalty stands, unless... The chairman looked up. Unless what? Unless you can guarantee immediate remediation, Sterling said. We need a new compliance officer, someone who knows the architecture. Someone who has proven they prioritize security over speed. We will agree to a temporary freeze on the fine if, and only if, the remediation plan is led by Ms. Morgan. She has full autonomy, no executives, no interference. She reports directly to us. The chairman did not hesitate. He did not ask for a vote. He did not look at the CEO. Agreed, the chairman said. Emery Morgan is appointed interim chief technology officer effective immediately. He turned his gaze to Marlo. Mr. Pierce, the chairman said, you are relieved of your duties. Security will escort you from the premises. Do not return to the office. Legal will be in touch regarding your severance, or lack thereof. Marlo stood there. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. His mouth moved, but no words came out. He was a man who had built his entire career on buzzwords and charisma, and in the face of raw, hard evidence, he had nothing left. 2 security guards stepped forward. Marlo didn't fight. He looked like he was in shock. As they led him out of the obsidian room, he stopped at the door and looked back at me. You killed the company, he whispered. You burned it down. No, Marlo, I said. I fireproofed it. The door clicked shut. I sat down. Noah was still staring at the table, tears running down his face. He was safe. He was damaged, but he was safe. Sterling looked at me. The fine is frozen. The clock is ticking. Can you fix it? I can, I said. I pulled my laptop toward me. I had root access now. I had the mandate. I had the power. I opened the main configuration file. I found the line that set the session token retention to 24 hours. I deleted it. I typed in the new value. 15 minutes. I found the script that generated the fake secure badge. I deleted it. I initiated the encryption protocol for the database at rest. It would take 6 hours to re-encrypt the entire user base, but it would be done right. I hit commit. On the big screen at the front of the room, the dashboard refreshed. The bright yellow compliance warning box flickered. It held for a second. Then, it vanished. In the top right corner, a small, honest green light appeared. System status secure, encryption verified, compliance 100%. It was not flashy. It was not exciting. It did not have a fancy animation. It was just a boring green light, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I closed my laptop. "It is done," I said. Sterling nodded. He stood up and extended his hand. "Thank you, Ms. Morgan. We will see you at the quarterly review." I shook his hand. Then I stood up and walked over to Noah. "Come on," I said. "We have work to do. We have to rebuild the team." "Why?" Noah asked, wiping his eyes. "Why did you save me?" "I helped them." "Because you are an engineer," I said. "And engineers make mistakes, but we fix them. We do not hide them." We walked out of the obsidian room. The hallway was long and quiet. Outside the windows, the mountains were standing tall against the blue sky. I did not smile. I did not celebrate. I did not feel a rush of victory. I just felt the heavy, satisfying weight of competence. Marlowe was gone. The $10.2 million bomb was defused. The liars had been exposed. I took a deep breath. The air in Denver was thin, but it was clean. "Now," I said to the empty hallway, "we do it right. We do not do it fast." The screen behind me in the empty room glowed a steady, solid green. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on whether Emery did the right thing. If you enjoyed this revenge story, please subscribe to the Boss Revenge Stories channel. Hit the like button and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to hear the truth.